Good evening, viewers from around the world. It's my pleasure to welcome you again to Elombah Television tonight. The very important subject we are going to discuss tonight is President Buhari's Petroleum Industry Bill, the controversies, dangers, and the future of Nigeria's oil industry. With me tonight to discuss this very important topic is Mr. Emeka Ugwuonye, Esquire. Mr. Ugwuonye is the president, Eculaw Group, and founder and chief executive officer, Due Process Advocates Movement. Mr. Ugwuonye, you're welcome to our program tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, we also have Barrister Eluchie, a lawyer, partner, PADDI Associates based in Nigeria. Barrister Eluchie, you are welcome to our program.
Thank you very much for having me on your program.
All right, I'm sure Salihu Abubakar will join us. The Chief Executive Officer, League Management Company, Abuja, but is also affiliated with the University of Maiduguri. I don't know whether Mr. Abubakar is here with us tonight or will join later. Not yet. Dr. Daniel Bwala, Special Advisor to the Deputy Senate President, also with the Lincoln Inn based in the United Kingdom. Dr. Bwala will join us later. He's not here with us yet. Okay, we have two of our speakers with us tonight. I'm sure we are all familiar with the controversy generated by the Petroleum Industry Bill. Will any of our guests start with telling us the history of this bill? Barrister Eluchie, let's start with you.
Thank you very much. The agitation to have a Petroleum Industry Bill has been on for the past 20 years in this format now, having a PID, that's the Petroleum Investment Industry Bill, has been on for over 20 years now. And it's basically to address the problems, the concerns and the fears of people from the oil producing areas who feel that they are contributing too much and that they are losing too much from the activities of the petroleum sector. So basically the bill was supposed to cater for their needs and ensure that we had a harmonious petroleum industry in the country. It has suffered a lot of obstacles on its path, and this is the first time it's actually getting passed by the National Assembly. But what is passed now is problematic, as we'll discover in the course of this program. So you want me to go on? I mean, on my own part, one of the things that I find most worrisome about this Petroleum Industry Bill, the current one that was passed by the National Assembly, is the extent to which the drafters of this bill have gone to almost like being vindictive. What I mean by being vindictive is ordinarily the bill is supposed to protect and provide for the host communities. But when you look at it, when you look at the content, like they say, the devil is in the details, you will marvel at the extent to which the bill has actually gone to take away things that ordinarily should even belong to these host communities. So in the course of our discussion, we'll be looking at it from various, from three core aspects. The issue of the constitutional provisions. Secondly, the chapter 3, which deals with the host community development trust. And then the access of participants.
Mr. Ugwuonye, can you hear me?
I can hear you very well, but I can't hear Mr. Eluchie very well.
Wow. Yes, that's what I wanted to point that out.
In my ears.
Okay, yeah. So are you hearing me now?
Yeah, it's much better now. Yes.
Okay. I think I have to hold the speaker to the. So I mean that's just
let's now that you can hear us, let's pause a little here, because this being a very, very important subject, a lot of people are following us online. We want Nigerians to carefully and pinpoint the issues under discussion. So we'll take them one by one, Barrister Eluchie. So that's why I wanted to pause you, but you weren't hearing me.
Okay.
So thank you for tracing the history of the Petroleum Industry Bill. And Mr. Ugwuonye, I don't know whether you were able to find out why previous administrations found it difficult to pass this bill, this law earlier. Were you able to pick it up?
I have an idea. You see, this is the most significant piece of legislation in Nigeria in recent times. Apart from the constitutional bill, where we didn't have a bill in that order. But in terms of significance, this bill is one of the most significant legal developments in Nigeria. We are talking about petroleum, oil and gas, which is the mainstay of Nigerian economy. That is what gives Nigeria relevance in many areas that you look at. Over the years, Nigeria had never been able to live up to its measure economically or in terms of influence that could have naturally flowed from its incredible amount of oil and gas reserves. So, and the reason for that was because we never had adequate legal and regulatory environment which Nigeria could ride upon to project itself to its measure. So this bill is everything. The controversies in this bill, you can see, is everything. So normally in the legislative process, the significance or weight of issues being covered by a piece of legislation will determine the amount of politicking, the amount of pressures, the amount of the currents of interest. So I am not surprised that this bill took so long and it's not yet over. You can see right now that even with the progress made, so many controversies are left unresolved. And, so it's not surprising it took this long length of time for it to be done. So much political will was required, so much bickering and politicking were involved. And as will come out in the course of this discussion, you will hear, I hope, about caucus meetings in Emeka by a segment of the Nigerian political territory or political geography, or geopolitics, as you may say. The North and the South dichotomy, the North-South tension, which had been part of Nigerian history throughout the colonial days up to the moment, came out in full force in this bill. So I am not surprised it took so long for it to happen. That's my guess. I'm sure others may have different opinions as to why.
All right. We thank you very much for setting this tone. I don't know whether our two other guests are now here with us, Dr. Bwala and Mr. Sanusi. If you are here, please indicate, but I haven't seen your name, unless you sign with.
Dan, I think you have lost audio. We can't hear you.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Now, wow. All right. Well, thank you. Okay, I was saying I don't know whether our two other guests have joined.
I can hear you, but I don't know if you can hear me.
All right, iPhone, please, can you identify yourself?
I don't know if my own name has always been with my identity, but it is showing over there. I'm Daniel Bwala. Unfortunately, my apologies first for tuning in late, and unfortunately, I can't be on video because I'm driving on the highway. I planned for this meeting, prepared for this meeting, but something happened, an unfortunate situation that I had to pay a visit to a family. So I'm driving. That's why I can't be on the video. My apologies.
That's okay. So since you are driving, you can only hear us now. You are not able to make contribution at the moment until you settle down.
No problem.
It's a question, not a comment.
Okay, no, whichever one you want, I'm okay by it. If you feel I can talk, I'm ready. If you feel I have to settle, then no problem. But I know that in the next 25 minutes, I should settle.
Okay, let's allow you to settle, please, for your dear life. Settle down so that we'll have any. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Our other guest, I'm not sure he's here with us. Okay. Now, let us first look at the positives of this bill passed by the National Assembly. Barrister Eluchie, are you still with us?
Yes, are you hearing me well now?
Yes, I can hear you very, very well. Now, are you able to identify some positives in this PIB?
Well, the major positive I can identify is that at least there is recognition of the fact that special consideration have to be given to the host communities. I mean, there is recognition of that fact. There's honestly not much positives to take out from this bill as it. So the positives are quite far-fetched, and because it's almost what you're seeing is things have been replicated or repeated. Like in the concerning gas flaring is the same provision that we've had in the previous Petroleum Act. But the fact that there's a recognition amongst all stakeholders that there should be special provision for host communities is one positive outcome from this bill. Whether the percentage given is meaningful or not, we will discuss that later. But for me, that's just positive.
Okay, Barrister Ugwuonye, are you able to identify some positives in this bill?
Yes, there are a number of things that I would consider a progress on what have been in the past. As Mr. Eluchie said, some of these progressive elements are more symbolic than substantive. I think that it was necessary to bring our Nigerian main legislation on oil up to date. What we had before were contained in various laws and various regulations, and there were so much discretionary powers given to the ministers. Some of those have been streamlined a bit, brought together under one piece of legislation that one could look at and say this resolves a wide range of things. So this law essentially brought together, this bill brought together, and I believe Eluchie will agree, things that had existed, rules that had existed in various pieces of law and regulations. So to that extent, it makes it user-friendly. A person can look at a single document and say, this is where you find all of it. That is important from the point of view of somebody trying to study Nigerian legal environment for the purpose of the oil sector, or from the point of view of a lawyer. You know, this bill did to the oil sector what Kama did to business law and business rules all over. However, the bill also, it makes it more attractive from the point of view of foreign investors. There are greater certainties in terms of what to expect, how to go about it, where to go. So to that extent of harmonization, to that extent of user-friendliness, to that extent of diminution of uncertainties, it is good. But on the substantive issues that have given rise to crisis in the past, the bill still has a lot to do to bring us to that comfort zone. And to that extent, I will agree with Eluchie that it's progress, what we may call 2 steps forward and 1 step back. If you look at the 2 steps, you think we moved far, but when you consider the 1 step back, you find out that it wasn't too much of a progress.
All right, I thank you very much. So now let's look at the negatives that you've been able to identify in this bill, which has given rise to so many controversies. Let me point out that before now, I've approached the senators who are passing these laws to grant us interviews, and none of them are willing to speak now. They tell you, wait until we pass the bill. And my question is, why should I wait for you to pass the law when it is already too late, before you start hearing from Nigerians what they dislike about what you are doing? But let's go on. Nigerian politicians don't always like to Nigeria. They simply want to do what they like. without trying to find out what the Nigerians want. And that, I think, is exactly what is happening with this Petroleum Industry Bill. But let's move forward. Now, Barrister Eluchie, what are some negatives you've been able to identify in this bill that the National Assembly want to force down the throat of Nigerians?
Well, thank you very much. One of the negatives, I think a major negative is this issue of what percentage to accord the host communities. The host communities are started with asking for 10% of operational costs. And the House of Reps passed 5%, but eventually after the harmonization, I think it's now down to 3%. Not just the percentage given to these host communities. When you look at the details of the bill, even the 3% which the host communities think they are going to get from operational costs is whittled down further. I mean, under very, very, very opaque means. These 3%, the host community development trust will be established by an entity called the settler. That is the person who has been granted the operational license to prospect or to work in an oil field. That is the settler. That is the entity that has the powers to constitute the host community development trust. Who will receive these 3%? Now, it is not even coming to the community. The settler will establish an entity that will receive the 3%, and from the provisions of this bill as is now, the whole 3% will not be devoted to works for these communities. No, it is only 75% of the 3%. Now, get me, under section 244 of this PIB, only 75% of the 3% is devoted for capital, to what they call the capital fund, which is to fund projects in the host communities. You now ask yourself, what happens to the remaining 25%? 20% of this 3% is put in what is called the reserve fund, which the settler, which is an entity working in these host communities, can decide to pay in or not pay in. And the remainder 5% is supposed to be for operational costs, which this same settler decides what happens with it. I don't know if you get what I'm saying, the picture. The picture is this. The host communities think they are getting 3%, but in reality, under section 244 of the PIB, they end up with 75% only. The remainder 20% and 5% respectively is at the discretion of the operators to decide what happens. To make it worse, it is this same operator who is now tagged a settler that will constitute the host community development trust. It's an entity that will now take charge of this so-called 75%. So even the so-called 3% that they're getting, it has been reduced to 75% of 3%, and that is still under the purview of the settler. So that's what I'm saying. This PIB, if we're looking at it from how it will impact on the host communities, it is a disaster. I mean, because in the villages, in the creeks, they are thinking, okay, we're going to have 3% of this operational cost, but no, they're not getting it. They are not getting it. They are not getting it. What will get to them at most is 75%. And this 75%, like I said, is for capital fund. What I now realize is this, after going through the PIB, when you hear capital projects, capital funds, the average Nigerian sees school projects, building projects, roads and water boreholes and all that stuff. There is no provision for capacity building, human capacity development, for scholarship, because this 5% is for capital projects. So what are these host communities? I mean, you build roads and you build all this stuff, but then what of the human capacity in the host communities? It's quite worrisome. And to even further make matters worse, this same settler who is The settler is defined in section 318 of this, that defines the glossary and terms and definitions. Defines that any person who has license to operate in the petroleum sector in any community. This same settler has the powers to decide who is a host community, for goodness sake. So the settler can say, okay, as far as we're concerned today, the host community, though we are working in Abonema or in one other area or in Bonny, a host community for whatever purposes can be a community in Benue State or in Kano State. They have the total discretion to decide who will be a host community. So you now, when like the details, the devil is in details of this PID. The celebration out there in the streets is okay, we're going to have 3%. But my dear people from these host communities, you're not going to get that. Even the 3% you're getting is whittled down. So for me, that's a huge minus. There are other minuses, but I'll allow other guests here to also make one or two issues on this.
All right. Yeah. We thank you very much. And I'm sure our listeners are noting. For those who would like to ask questions, so we will welcome your questions in the next in the next 20 minutes or so. So, Mr. Ugwuonye, what are some of the misgivings you have with regards to this bill?
Well, there are we have a number of them. If I may say something earlier, Daniel, you commented on the fact that we needed to make impact on the bill before it was passed. In other words, it would seem now as if it's done, it's not done. The bill has not been assented by the president. And from my experience, the president has the capacity to listen to the sentiments and feelings and opinions of the public. All these things are considered by the president before he assents the bill, meaning that he can actually send the bill back and demand revisions. So the work we are doing today, or what Elombah News is doing at this moment, is not too late. It's extremely important. This is actually a very important moment for the president to understand what's about to sign and to realize he has power to reject or refuse to assent to it, which will ultimately lead to further discussions over it at the National Assembly, because it goes back to the National Assembly for them to either override the president's denial of action or to make modifications to a point where the president will accept it. So it's important, it's never too late. About what Eluchie said now, and I must say something about it before I go to a separate topic. He is right, there are problems. But my problem is not with the details of that 3%. Any piece of legislation at this stage are just mere words. We must leave room for certain things and clarifications that will come up in the process of interpretation. I am sure that if somebody, a settler, declares a host community, a community that has no relevance or involvement in anything, somebody could challenge it in law, and the court is capable of saying, no, you really don't have that unlimited power to declare anything a host community. So I will not worry about it at this point. What I'm worried about is, looking at the letter of the bill, is 3% adequate? Is 3% truly reflective of what the host community deserves? And what is the basis upon which, what is the philosophy of accommodating the interests of indigenous community? And this time I'm using the word indigenous community instead of host community, because I'm using an international language, which oil companies globally, if you look at petroleum law from an international perspective, they don't use the word host community, they use indigenous community. Because ultimately, the operators are going to be major foreign companies, foreigners, operating in this community where land and everything belongs to indigenous people, more or less. So what gave rise to it? It is because we agreed that oil exploration has a devastating impact on any environment where it operates. Not only does it take up space, land space, road space, and things, it has ecological and environmental impact. It is the need for remediation. It's the need to make sure there is some kind of redeeming effect or compensation to the devastated environment that we say, give them something. So if you look at that philosophy, then you ask yourself, why 3%? What is wrong with 20%? What is wrong with 10%? In the specific Nigerian, the context of this bill, the first fraction that was proposed was 10%. So the question is it correct to move? What was the principle or philosophy or the arithmetic that justified the push down from 10% to 5% to 3%? What guided them? I don't think that the lawmakers were adequately guided by any scientific method or formula. 3% looks like a mockery. Will it be sufficient to compensate a community that has been devastated? And does it even accommodate the history? Because there is something else. When you look at host community, a host community that has been affected in the past 20 years, when this bill was not operational, cannot be in the same position as a host community that is yet to be impacted or just being impacted under a new regime, new regulatory environment. So it doesn't sound properly done. It sounds so awkward. It sounds so random. I don't understand the philosophy that that made them choose 3%. So that is my problem. I think if we have to guess it, 3% is too small. And if they have to insist on 3%, there has to be some explanation as to why 3%. Now, that is the first point. I don't want to belabor it because my friend Eluchie has already hammered on it. Now, there are other things that are problematic with the bill. One thing is that who is the host community? Eluchie pointed at it, but there is another aspect of it. Host community now includes any land, any state, any territory where the pipeline passes. So, well, I do not want to contest that laying of pipeline through my land is disruptive enough for me to deserve something. I don't want to contest that. But I don't think that laying a pipeline through my land is as devastating as drilling in my land. So again, this unscientific approach to this host community definition is troubling because essentially host community will mean some territories in River State that have been over the past decades ravaged by oil activities like Ogoni. Indeed, the host community will now mean Ogoni is the host community, and any state in Kaduna or Benue State through which pipeline passes also becomes a host community. I don't think the Ogoni people will agree that they should get the same equal amount with a place in a Benue State over which pipeline passes. So that is one problem. Another problem is that the same law, the same bill that could not give the host community more than 3% is allocating 30% to what is called the frontier exploration, the frontier basins. So, and these frontier bases have been in the north. Their proven capacity has not been verified. So there is tremendous manipulation or potential for manipulation because essentially 30% of the resources or the operating resources of NNPC is just going to go to the north because they are frontier bases. And why are these areas with improving reserves, improving capacity to contribute to the resources, or proven productive capacity, why would they get this chunk? And for host communities, you can't find it within your heart, within your thinking, to give them at least 5%. Edwin Clark is insisting on 10%. And now let me tell you something else before I stop here. It defeats the purpose of the bill. One of the purposes of the bill was to create a friendly environment to attract foreign investors so they could make greater investments in our oil sector, which will ultimately boost Nigerian economy and foreign earnings, fantastic. However, if the host community, indigenous community are not settled, they will deny access. They will disrupt access of those investors into their land. So what you think you are winning on one side, you are losing on the other side. This content in Ogoni land or any other community is going to be taken into consideration by Shell or Exxon for them to enter that community. So you have to look at the bill. On the one hand, is solving a problem, paying Peter and robbing Paul at the same time. So if you want to attract foreign investors, you really have to take a comprehensive look at the obstacles or things that bother foreign investors. Instability and violence and disruptions bother foreign investors even more than regulatory uncertainties. So that is one thing. Then there are others, I'm sure, but let me allow some other people to say, because I'm sure you're going to get to the issue of the provision on the bill regarding capacity to import refined fuel. We'll get to that.
All right. I thank you very much. I don't know whether Dr. Daniel Bwala is in a position to. Dr. Bwala.
Okay. Can I make a correction to what he said just now?
All right.
So the viewers, yeah. What I want to correct is that the 30% is not that we're giving to the frontier areas. It's not from the operational costs. Rather, it is 30% from the profit of the oil companies. So it's a huge difference. 3% of operational cost is fixed, but 30% of profit.
All right, I think we lost Barrister Eluchie there. Hopefully he will come back. Dr. Daniel Bwala, are you in a position to speak now? Have you settled down? Okay, Barrister Eluchie, you are back.
Yes, okay. So I was just saying that 30% is 30% of profits, while the 3% is of operational costs. Okay, it's a huge difference because the operational costs are known. But the profits are not all times that is. NNPC has been declaring losses for some time now.
So let's have that clear. One of the provisions of the law is that 30% of the profits made by the oil companies will go towards the exploration of oil in the frontier states.
That is true. Yes,
now, but do we have the explanation of these frontier states? So I want our listeners to be clear about some of these legal terms. What is a frontier state?
Okay, section 318 of this PIB defines frontier state as any or all acreage in an area of land defined as in a basin which the commission itself declares to be a frontier area. Now, that is a problem with this bill. You cannot from it be sure of anything. It's whatever the commission declares as
do you see some of the cunning aspects of this bill that so many people are concerned about?
I know, and it's genuine. The concerns are very genuine because there is deliberate attempts at being opaque, at even playing tricks. I mean, let me give you another example where you'll be amazed at to what extent some of these drafters can go. There is a clear intent to stop any kind of legal process in this under the PIB. Why do I say that? The PIB under section 307 says you must start whatsoever action against any of the settler companies or operational operators within 3 months of the accrual of the problem you want to litigate against. Now, further down, under section 308, it goes ahead and says you must give a 1 month notice period before you commence litigation. What does that tell you? It gives you only 2 months for any company to react. And when you realize that the composition of the host community development trust is set up by these same settlers, ask yourself, will 2 months be enough for a community to understand that there's a problem, commence correspondences, and decide on litigation? So clearly, the BIB intends to knock off any cost to litigation by the host communities. And I think this is spectacularly wicked. It is spectacularly wicked. So there are more and more reasons why this PID should never see the light of day.
Let's proceed. I want this issue of the frontier states to be clear, because if you don't understand it, you may not be able to understand the intent of this bill. But I want lawyers to explain to us, what is this? Mr. Ugwuonye, how do you see this issue of a frontier, 30% of oil companies' profits to go towards exploring oil in the frontier states?
Yes, you see, it's a very interesting thing because it's more of international press that are emphasizing on this frontier characteristic. Frontier as intended in this language is not different from the general understanding of frontiers. The borderline area, the areas that are not the main area, the borderline.
Okay, in layman's terms, where are these frontier states in Nigeria? What areas do you see as these frontier states?
Anywhere NNPC says there might be oil reserve. For instance, since the 80s, since 1991, when I was at Chevron, we knew that oil reserves, oil was discovered to exist around the Chad area, the Chad Basin. It had always been mentioned. In fact, if you look, petroleum reserve exists in many parts of the world, but not up to a point where it could be developed or exploited. So there have been exploration, or a survey, seismic studies all over the northern part of Nigeria for various areas where there could be oil. It was discovered that the Chad Basin has a huge reserve. And it is not surprising, really, because from Chad, you can move up to Libya and huge reserve may have that. So these constitute frontier state. I mentioned specifically the Chad Basin, but it could also mean anywhere else that they carry out surveys and say there is oil. So they may decide to move emphasis. You see, because the funniest thing is this: NNPC's investment and exploration activities supposed to be driven by economics. But that's not what the bill is doing. The bill is not allowing it to be driven by economics. The bill is driving it by politics. Telling NNPC, well, you can start you can explore oil in Maiduguri, regardless of the amount, regardless of the reserve. And of course, there may be strategic, non-business, but strategic reasons to shift NNPC operations to Maiduguri and de-emphasize River State. For instance, if you
right, let's so that we don't lose track of the train of thoughts. I see Marcel raising up his hand. Do you have any contribution at this point, Marcel?
Yes, Dan. When I look at things from the beginning, I could tell the end, And when you look at governance structure, it's always a game of power and interest. And once you are not on the table, of negotiation, not just being on the table, you need to be on the table and be of equal power with any other person on that table for you to be able to negotiate and protect your own interest. And when you look at the governance structure in Nigeria, it is skewed. It's skewed towards the North. The North has the majority, they has the Senate, they has everything. you know, if they do not want to pass any bill, that bill will not pass. If they want to pass any bill, that bill will pass. So do you expect the North to shoot themselves, to not protect their own interest? Look at, see, I understand governance, policies, rules, and then Emeka was saying that we should not bother ourselves on the interpretation in the bill, that the judiciary will apply their own discretion. And I said no, the judiciary will only interpret what is in that bill. That bill contains a lot of discretionary powers. We are trying to build institutions. The National Assembly under Lawan is building personalities. How would that PIB ensure a smooth running institutions where nobody can manipulate? Do you understand? And let me tell you, this will keep on happening. Let's not deceive ourselves. You know, when people like us talk, it will look as if maybe we don't believe there is any progress. I told you guys, is, forgive my language, it's trash. The country as a whole, and I keep saying it, Dan, I keep saying it, we will come here, we'll keep on talking. The North that controls the House and the Senate, and then President Buhari, somebody saying Buhari is not going to change nothing. I can bet my life on it.
All right, let's concentrate, Mr. Gobo, let's concentrate on this. We'll come to the final conclusions later. Yeah.
So my final conclusion is this: don't expect anything good from a Northern-dominated assembly to benefit the South. Don't.
All right, let's we'll come to those issues, the issues you're talking about later, but we want to critically analyze this bill. Other people raising their hand, I'll be taking their hand one by one, but let's get back to our guests now. So it is clear that 30% of NNPC profits or other oil companies' profits will go to frontier states. And the frontier states we now understand is any area where NNPC say we are searching for oil. Even if the amount of oil discovered in that area does not have, we cannot be explored in commercial quantities. And the report we are receiving is that under President Muhammadu Buhari, a lot of oil exploration activities have been going on in the north. Buhari has, in fact, he is not hidden. There was an instruction to NNPC to develop oil exploration in northern part of Nigeria. So that is why some people are afraid that this law, in other words, is intended to take money away, oil money away, and send it to those areas where they say they have discovered oil, even though those oils are not being explored in commercial quantities. That is one major controversy people have discovered about this law. And the Southern Governors Forum has issued a press statement condemning the PIB. This is one of the particular issues they mentioned. Let's go on. We want to pick this thing one by one. We will take your questions later on. Tanga and Dr. But let's wait. Let's go back to our guests. Any other controversial provision in this law? Let's continue. Barrister Eluchie, please.
Thank you very much. There's a lot of controversial issues. Section 257 of this same PID bill makes it possible for host communities to even forfeit the so-called 3% peanuts they are getting. And that is if there is any act of vandalization, sabotage, or civil unrest in their communities.
Really? I didn't pick this one. I didn't pick this one.
When you realize that the pipelines, for instance, most of the infrastructure used to extract crude are 30, 40, 50 years old. And even it has always been a condition that most of the oil spills is as a result of rusting pipelines that destroy the communities. And then, but the oil companies will say it is the communities or the locals who are trying to break it through. You will now realize that the 3% that was even assured these communities will usually, they will not get a dime from it. Because any spill, any whatsoever, there will be contention that it is an act of vandalization, sabotage, or civil unrest. So, like I keep on saying, the PIB is the most...
Let's not... sorry, I always say we'll come to the conclusion. So we want to pick out the controversial subjects first. So thank you for pointing out this one. Barrister Ugwuonye, please. Yeah. Any other controversial point?
Yes. there is a provision in that bill that speaks about which companies in Nigeria would have license to import refined fuel in case Nigerian productive capacity is not adequate. So we are talking about petroleum import license. They limited it to the output capacity of each refining company. So in other words, only it will be done in accordance with output capacity. The implication is that most of all these producers in Nigeria, refiners in Nigeria, have very limited capacity, in the few thousands. However, it is anticipated that Dangote's refinery, which is under construction, will have 90%. The capacity of Dangote refinery will be 90% of the total capacity in Nigeria. And now remember, so you've given Dangote, therefore, 90% market share in terms of rights to import crude. There is an implication in that if you look at competition. And why is it? Now listen, why do you have to, what will give rise to the need to import fuel? You will import fuel if production locally is not sufficient. So, and Dangote has 90% production capacity. And you also give him, in the alternative, 90% import capacity. It really means that Dangote may actually depress production for the purpose of increasing his import capacity. So Dangote may one day sit down and say, well, it makes sense for me to import than for me to refine. Therefore, I stop refining. Once Dangote stops refining, then the need to import increases. And Dangote then becomes the one who enjoys that. So looking at it from competitive law or competition or antitrust or monopoly issues, you'll find out that this is a very horrible arrangement. You created a terrible incentive for Dangote. If anybody in Dangote's position would actually know that if his machine breaks down, for instance, if there's a problem in their refining, in their machinery, they will say, all right, we can either spend money and fix it and continue refining, or guess what? We can just leave it as it is and import. It is the fact that the importation alternative existed that hindered Nigerian refining capacity. So those who control refining capacity should not benefit from loss of capacity. Otherwise, you may have loss of capacity that is self-induced for the purpose of creating an opportunity to import. So it is a concern, and Reuters pointed it out. Another oil and gas news blog in United Kingdom pointed it out. I haven't seen Nigerian local media pointing that out. So that is one of the things that is a big problem.
Yeah, I would like our listeners to get this. Thank you very much, Ms. Ugwuonye, for bringing this out. I would like our listeners to note this point. This new Petroleum Industry Bill says that only companies with active refining licenses should import fuel. Now, there are 23 companies in Nigeria that have refining licenses. But most of them, like Mr. Ugwuonye pointed out, process less than 12,000 barrels a day. But Dangote alone has the capacity, according to them, to refine 650,000 barrels per day. So that means that if it's only companies with active refining licenses that should import fuel, and that importation is based on your capacity, effectively, like Ms. Ugwuonye said, Dangote alone should be allowed to import 90% of petroleum products into Nigeria. The danger is that, one, you are in effect making Dangote a monopoly, that Dangote will have the monopoly of importing fuel into Nigeria. The second one pointed by Ugwuonye, which is very important, I haven't noticed before, is that Dangote can as well sit down and say, why should I be refining oil? Let me depress so that there is a need for oil, and then I will simply be importing fuel into Nigeria. Many people have pointed this out, but Nigerians, like he said, I haven't noticed Nigerians pointing at, anyway, I think this day mentioned something like that at the Southern Governors Forum, but that is one other controversial area of this PIB. Now let's take a question from the audience. Dr. Tony Mweziwe, please. Only on this bill, please. Let's not go into other areas which we will deal with at the end of the program. Only on this bill. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you. Well, I don't know why you are specifically telling me. We're not talking about any other politics except this bill. But they've stated the obvious. But what I want to state really is that the PIB exhibits the level of intelligence, the level of planning, the North really, exhibited in their conquest of the South, of our so-called superior knowledge. If you look at every point of the, the provisions of that bill, there is always a northern anchor, a dominant northern anchor there. You talk about the management of the host communities. You now ask, who are the operators? And when you talk of operators, you talk of those who are holding the oil well licenses. Today, the majority of those holding oil well licenses are the same Fulani people. So they are actually going to determine who are the host communities, and they have the power. Then you are now talking about the frontiers. Oh, just as one of the guests said earlier, the federal government over the time been wasting money in the North, in the so-called Lake Chad Basin for oil exploration. But that is just a conduit, pipe for taking our money. Because if you look at the demography of the Chad region, you find that Nigeria only controls one-third of the Lake Chad Basin. We only control one-third. About half of it, in fact, more than half of it, is controlled by Chad. The other part, little part by Cameroon and Niger. And in Chad, if Chad controls more than about 2/3 of the Chad Basin, real Lake Chad Basin, if you look at the demography, you find that Chad Republic is even the people who are supposed to be prospecting oil in Lake Chad region. But Chad has oil, but the oil in Chad is controlled in the south by the Sahara. And the Sahara are the majority, and they are the Christians, and they are being controlled, and that's where the oil is. There is no oil in Lake Chad Basin. And if there is oil there, Chad, which actually controls the largest landscape area of Lake Chad Basin, should have invested in oil exploration there. So the frontier, whether it is profit or operational cost, it is in a kind of legitimatization of that appropriation of our resources for the Northerners. And who are the people to determine and define the frontier area? The same NNPC, which is dominated by them. From the managing director to the gate man, is a Fulani from the North. So these are the people who will still determine which part is defined as a frontier zone. So in my
okay. All right.
Yes, in my own, that PIB will not work.
Okay, well, we'll come to whether it will work later, Dr. Wezi, but we'll come to that point later. Now, we have identified, I think, 2 or 3 major controversial areas. Barrister Eluchie, what next?
Yes.
Any other controversial points?
Well, the controversial point is I wonder why the states, the oil producing states, have not availed themselves of the powers that they are guaranteed under the Constitution. The controversial, what makes it controversial is that under Section 1 of the PID, it vests lands where petroleum is being sourced from in the government of the Federation of Nigeria. Now, if you recollect that this PIB is a subsidiary legislation, it is subsidiary to the Constitution of the country. The Constitution, the Land Use Act, which is part of the Constitution, vests control and management of land in the governors of the states. They are the ones that should be issuing licenses or leases. The federal government under the Nigerian Constitution has absolutely no reason, no right to issue any license over land. Even if you claim you own the resources under, which is dubious. Under the Constitution of Nigeria, as this 1999 Constitution, the Land Use Act is still a part of it, the federal government has no business issuing licenses on land issues. So why have the states, why has Rivers, Imo, Bayelsa not exercised their rights under this Constitution to say, no, we are the ones that should be issuing licenses? And this same fraud, because it's a fraud that the federal government has been issuing licenses over for processing license over land, this same fraud is being transferred under Section 1 of the BIB, which vests land on the government of the Federation. So that is another key area which we hope that the states can now, if the states want to oppose this PID, they should start by exercising their rights, which vests all lands in the state governor, and the lands in the rural areas, not just the state governor. The land in the rural areas are vested in the local governments in those states. The federal government has no business with land. That is why a state like Zamfara can be prospecting its oil, its gold, and doing whatever it wants with it. And the states in the Niger Delta and the oil producing states are feeling like they are lost when they have the rights under the Constitution. I don't know whether the attorney generals have been sleeping, but I know that if these same rights was vested in the Lagos state government, for instance, or in the Ondo state government, this nonsense will not continue. Rivers, Bayelsa, Cross River, Akwa Ibom, Imo State should exercise their rights under the current Constitution, the Land Use Decree, which says they are the ones vested with powers to manage and control lands, not the federal government. All licenses over land, over lands issued by the federal government are unconstitutional. And this is clear. You don't have to interpret. It is clear law. The Land Use Decree, the Land Use Act, Section 1. I will read it out. Subject to provision of this act, all land comprised in the territory of each state in the federation is hereby vested in the governor of that state, and such land shall be held in trust and administered for the use and common benefit of all Nigerians in accordance with the provisions of this act. Section 2 now says, all land in the all other lands subject to the act be under the control and management of the local government within the state. The federal government of Nigeria has no business issuing licenses for land. And there's no way you can prospect for oil without land. Now, they may go offshore because the Land Use Act does not even cater for that. But even under the doctrine of littoral states, the states can also say we own those lands, those offshore platforms. But let us leave those ones for now. But any oil facility, any petroleum resource on that lands in any state is vested in the state government. That is the current Constitution of Nigeria. It has not been amended. That is why, having seen this very lacuna, having seen this loophole, Mr. President is now desperately trying to call the president. That's why the Nigerian Constitution is saying, no, you cannot change the Land Use Decree, you cannot change the Land Use Act now by yourself. The lands belong to the state governors. So that is the ultimate.
Thank you. It's I think under this heading. Okay, let's hear from Mr. Ugwuonye first of all before I raise the other point. Let's see whether he will address it. Mr. Ugwuonye, what other controversy, or do you want to highlight on this issue of connection between Land Use Act and this PIB, or what other points do you have with regards to this PIB?
Well, I think that the discrepancy that Eluchie pointed out is not really the main concern. The main concern is that there is a political will in Nigeria today, some kind of coming together of forces to pass this bill despite the oppositions of the governors, despite the oppositions of the South, despite the oppositions of the oil-producing communities as we know them. You see, as long as that political will exists, as long as that caucus exists, Land Use Act, Constitution, all these things, that will override it. They will amend, the same votes can amend the Land Use Act. And I know that Eluchie will still not be satisfied, and rightly so, if he hears tomorrow that these guys gathered together and amended Land Use Act to the extent that it frustrates the bill. So I want to, my brother Eluchie, see, you made a very valid point, but I'm trying to look at the bigger thing. What is controlling the situation today is not the language of the bill, but the mindset of the people who drafted the bill and who voted for the bill. So what is going on in the bill today is actually the key issue of restructure in Nigeria.
All right, let's, we'll come to those questions later on. I want to know whether one of our guests, Salihu Abubakar, is here, or whether Dr. Bwala is back. It's not settled. If not, let me ask this question. Is it a concern that one of these concerns raised by the Southern Governors Forum is that the entire oil in Nigeria belongs to Nigeria, and that therefore the NNPC that controls Nigeria oil belongs to the three tiers of government: the federal government, the state government, and then the local government. So their concern is that one of the provisions of this PIB will be that there will be formed a new corporate entity incorporated under the Companies and Allied Matters Act to be called the Nigeria National Petroleum Corporation Limited. And so this new entity, if created, vests the entire shares in this new limited liability company on the federal government of Nigeria to be exercised by the federal ministers of finance and ministers of petroleum, will control these shares on behalf of the federal government. And that these shares are not transferable to any other person. So the governors are saying no. There is need to unbundle the NNPC, and if you are creating this new entity, the shares in this new corporate entity should be vested in the three tiers of government: the federal government, the state government, and the local government. Do you agree with the federal government PIB, or do you agree with the state governors from the South? Sorry, yes, Ms. Uwe, what do you want to say?
Well, the governors said more. The governors did not stop at that. Okay, because if they stopped at that, they will look silly, really. Because Ministry of Finance of Nigeria, who does it belong to? The whole Nigeria. Ministry of Petroleum, federal government, who does it belong? Belongs to the whole Nigeria. And of course, we can't have a scenario where instead of vesting it in the Ministry of Finance, we invest it in the Ministry of Finance and all the state ministries of finance. No, the governors went further to request that there is already in existence.
Yes, sorry, I missed that. Yeah.
Yes,
go on.
A holding entity for the collective interest or the resources of all Nigerian people. And they proposed, and that was the point where they began to make sense, Mr. Elombah. When they got to, when I was reading it, I was saying, hey, where are these guys going to? These governors are up to something again. But when they came to the point of the sovereign fund the Sovereign Wealth Authority, Sovereign Investment Authority, Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority as the holding, it makes sense.
Yes.
Because what they're now saying is they're not challenging the federal government per se, they're challenging the choice of Minister of Finance and Minister of Petroleum when there is already a vehicle which seems most suitable, and that is the Sovereign Fund. I think they make
sense. So do you agree? So yes, I thank you very much. So do you agree that since Nigeria already have right now the mandate of controlling Nigeria's oil funds is vested in the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority? Thank you for pointing that out. That is what the governors are saying. So do you agree with this new PIB, or do you agree with the Southern governors that the Nigeria? You agree with governors? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, Mr. Eluchie, what do you say?
Thank you. I think this is an attempt at a large-scale larceny, robbery by the federal government. Those who are propounding this bill with the fact that NNPC Limited becomes a baby of the federal government, it's actually highway robbery. It is of the grandest scale. The reason being that, as you rightly pointed out, Nigeria is supposed to have three components, VAT, federal, state, and local government. And then if one just decides by himself to take over everything that belongs to the three parties, it becomes very, very odd. And it is not proper to say that the Federal Minister of Finance belongs to everybody. The NNPC belongs to everybody. No, there is an entity. The Federal Minister of Finance reports to the president. The state ministries of finance reports to the state governors. So the Ministry of Finance at the federal level is not owned by everybody. It's owned by whoever is the president. So I think I agree with the view of the governors. And I further say that this action, this portion of the bill amounts to large-scale larceny. It's like robbery. I mean, pure and plain. This is an act of robbery. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Let's hear from Elder Tango Ugwuonye at this point. Tango Ugwuonye at this point. What's your question, sir?
I see the bill as something that is not possible because it's very imbalanced bill. They need to tabulate everything well.
We can't hear you.
I said they need to tabulate the bill well so people will understand really what is in the bill. Because the bill seems to have many clauses. In case of hazard, even the 3% is not sure. A lot of things is involved in the bill. And the frontier states, they are the ones to determine, because these people owns the land, they lost a lot, they lost their land.
So we have even stopped hearing from you entirely.
Yes.
No, we are not hearing you.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, but lowly. The volume is low.
Hello? Are you getting me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. From beginning, the bill is not straight because there's many clauses in the bill. The 3% is not sure. And the frontier state, they determine these people, the indigenous people own the land. And anywhere there is oil business, there's a lot of hazard. It affects nature, it affects their living, it affects everything. So if they really want to do everything in good faith, the bill will be well tabulated and passed. Hello? Hello? There's a disturbance.
Yeah, we can hear you. Go on.
The bill will be well tabulated, that people understand cross. But this bill involves many cross.
Yes, I think.
Not sure.
Okay, go on.
If there is a hazard, 3% is not sure. So what I'm saying is that my own view is that the bill will be really tabulated and people will understand. On the frontier states, even as we're talking now, nobody is sure who will be the frontier state if the bill is being passed. So the bill, as we look at, I think that's something that is not well organized.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We'll ask our guests later on to respond to the issues you raised, which I think Barrister Eluchie has referred to it before, the opaque nature of the provisions of this bill. We'll come back to that later, whether there is any hidden motives they don't want Nigerians to understand by the, is that why they're trying to make the provisions of the bill as opaque as possible? But we'll come back to that later on. Mr. Haruna Adamu, please, can you unmute yourself? And if you can turn down or stop the radio or television behind you. There is a radio or television behind you.
Mute it. Okay. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Go on.
How are you?
We thank God, Mr. Eluchie, how are you?
I'm very fine.
Well, I have listened to this program attentively. I have something to say. You see, we are all Nigerians. Whether you come from north or south, and we should have this country in our mind. The National Assembly comprises of our delegates that come from the north and the south. And whatever they are going to do, they are going to do it for the interest of the nation. I want to draw the attention of of those who are participating in this program that we should put this country. The southern governors fail to understand what they are doing. They should do it for the interest of the nation. 3% that was awarded, that should go to a certain side of the part of the country. They should equally know that the remaining percentage, they will also benefit from it. Now, my good friend Eluchie is saying that he supported the southern governors. He should know that we should remove tribalism, we should remove sectionalism, we should remove anything that would divide us and face this country and unite this country. That's my take-off. Thank you very much.
All right, I thank you. Okay, let's allow our guests to respond to some of the issues you raised. Let's start with Mr. Eluchie. The two issues by Tango and Haruna, please. Mr. Eluchie.
Okay, the earlier issue by Tango was what, please?
Regarding the opaque nature of the provisions of the bill. There are so many terms that Nigerians cannot easily understand. Yeah, and that leaves room for future manipulation.
Yeah. Actually, the opaque nature of the terms is not even leaving room for future manipulation. It's leaving room for immediate manipulation. Immediate. From the day the bill is signed, I mean, it can be interpreted in any way by the settlers, by those in government. So the host communities absolutely have nothing to celebrate with this bill. Absolutely nothing, because the so-called host community development trust, they have no stake in it. They can lose out all the money they should have in that 3%. So they have the opaque nature of the language used is deliberate. In response to my friend Haruna, the equity and justice is clear. We all want a united country, a united Africa, a united global community, but there must be equity and justice. So long as equity and justice is lacking, then there is actually no need to continue in slavery or in servitude. So the position of the Southern governors is very, very clear. The position that we have on this PIB is also very clear. Why, if you give those who are losing, who are falling sick out of oil exploration, their environment is devastated, the children have been born stunted, you give them only 3%, and even the 3%, you still steal it from them from the other way. And you say that the remaining 90% will still come to them. That's not true. It has not, I mean, the reality is that Nigeria is not balanced, and this imbalance have been heightened under the governance of Muhammadu Buhari. It's not an ethnic issue. It's just the individual.
Okay. I think what Haruna pointed out, that is why we missed the attendance of Salihu and Dr. Bwala, because we would have, I think they would have provided other perspectives to some of the issues we discussed. Let me emphasize more on what Haruna have been saying. You know, on the three controversies highlighted, one, that the bill will allow Dangote to have, it's possible for him to manipulate it and to have monopoly. One of the response from Dangote Group is that it is the same type of policy that drive the production of cement in Nigeria, because cement used to be imported in large quantities, but that once Nigeria started to give tax breaks in all those incentives to all cement production companies, cement production in Nigeria skyrocketed to the extent that the idea of importing cement from abroad virtually became non-existent. So that the idea of allowing Dangote and others in future the bill will give them the incentives to go into oil exploration to the extent that they will take over in effect from foreign and multinational oil companies. That is one. Another thing about the frontier states is that promoting the idea of oil exploration in other parts of Nigeria away from the Niger Delta is commendable. That the 30% given to frontier states will act as an incentive for oil companies to put more energy into prospecting for oil in the northern part of the country. But the only thing they are saying is that, is there a way to say that it will be only expended in those areas where the exploration of oil is commercially viable? That is what the Northerners are saying. That let us not condemn the issue of 30% of frontier states in its entirety, but that let us be talking of limiting it to only the areas where the production of oil is in commercial quantity. And I said those who are saying that 3% to Niger Delta oil communities is too small. They are saying, well, they have been receiving 17% all along. And if you go to Niger Delta states, you cannot see the evidence of that 70% in any case, because the 17% is going to the state government and the whole money is being squandered. But that when you now say the 3% should go to the communities directly, that it will be more beneficial to the communities instead of allowing state governors to squander the money the way they've been squandering 17%. And so these are some of the issues that they are pointing out with some of the, okay, another area is when you say that the interpretation of those communities is any areas where oil pipeline passed. They will tell you, well, that oil pipeline also passed through a lot of southeastern states, passed through a lot of north central states, passed through even southwestern states, that it is to enable the benefits of oil to benefit every part of Nigeria, just as Haruna is trying to point out. So how do our guests respond to some of these issues highlighted by Haruna in a little way, but I have now tried to expand so that we miss Dr. Bwala actually and Salihu in this discussion. They will have given us a more balanced approach. So let's start, Mr. Ugwuonye. How do you respond to some of these positives that are highlighting?
Briefly, the argument by Dangote staff is self-serving and actually very wrong. What he was trying to do was to justify monopoly. Today in Nigeria, Dangote has monopoly. He has the power to control the price of cement. He can actually decide tonight to add 200 naira to a bag of cement, and he will effectively achieve that. That is a position nobody should ever occupy, because that amounts to undue concentration of economic power of this country in one hand. Is dangerous. So, and his analysis that because of progress or because of what he considered a tax break for Dangote, that we now have a point in Nigeria where we don't have to import cement. He forgets that there is evidence that the price of cement worldwide compared to Nigeria is, the private segment in Nigeria is 183% higher than other parts of the world, which is evidence of monopoly. So it's not we don't have a record that we want to repeat. The record on cement is not something that we want to repeat in petroleum. That is one thing about it. Then the question about the need to diversify the activities or the center of activities or investment activities of NNPC is commendable. Yes, it is commendable, but that is a business decision. It's not a political decision. NNPC should be allowed as a matter of business consideration to explore wherever is viable and profitable. But they don't want to base it on economics. They want to base it on politics. So they're telling NNPC, even if you don't consider it economically viable, we mandate you to go and engage in activities in some areas, which has never happened anywhere in the world. The margin of political calculation with economic interest is something very terribly disturbing. Yes, also the question of the need, pipeline passing everywhere in the world, in Nigeria, and they're all benefiting, I agree. And that's why I said that if pipeline passes through my land, I consider it significant interruption for me to deserve something. But we must distinguish between a land where pipeline passed through and the land which is being drilled with factories and machineries and things and gas being flared in the environment. The impact on that environment, the disruptive impact of oil activities in such an environment is profound. On the other hand, it is tangential, where pipeline merely passes. Everybody should get something, but the critical thing is that small fish will fetch small firewood, and big fish will make big fire. That's it. The Ogoni people are ravaged, devastated. Pipeline did not just pass through their land. They have no land left. So you got to weigh these things and apportion it appropriately. Now, there is one other thing I want to emphasize here, if you permit me. You know, it's very convenient for us to sit here and make this South versus North issue. Make it Southern governors and the Northern governors. I want us to ask, how did our senators and members of the House of Representatives vote? What did they say during the debate leading to the votes? Because honestly, I'm from Enugu State. I have 3 senators there. I have 5 or 6 House of Rep members there. I cannot say that Enugu was not represented. So the question is, what did they do? Okay, they don't have the vote to carry determine the outcome. They don't have the number to determine the outcome. But at least, what do we have as record of their discussion? Is it only Dr. Eluchie and Emeka Ugwuonye that are worried? What about our brothers there in the houses where Eluchie, you got my point? Because ultimately, we can't say we were not represented. We may not have the votes, but we were represented.
That is what Haruna is saying, isn't it? Haruna is saying that the entire Nigerians have representatives at the National Assembly where this PIB have been debated. So, and therefore, we should allow them to make that decision on our behalf, isn't it?
No,
Very
I don't.
point. Instead of Eluchie and Emeka making the decisions here.
Why I don't agree with that is, if you look at the House of Reps, the entire 5 states in the Southeast have just about the same number of members in the House of Reps as the old Kano state.
But what was their debate? What was the argument? My brother, I agree with you. What was their, what do we have on record as what they said?
You know, the kind of National Assembly we have, all those are against saying nay, and the Senate President rules as he wishes. The votes don't even count. So that
the votes count. If you vote, if a senator votes, let us see, look at what happened yesterday with regards to the electoral bill. How one single senator, Abaribe, made sure that they will not just decide this thing and do it with a voice vote, that there must be a division. So their votes do count. And if you are a senator, if you are a House of Rep member, sat there, we will want to know what is their position. And that was what that Senator Abaribe's intervention accomplished, because eventually yesterday, we now saw how all our senators voted. Well, oh no, I think it was the day before yesterday. Or the yesterday. Okay,
by the way, Elombah, of the 15 senators from the Southeast, only 4 were present.
No, let us not overstate that issue. Let us not
only 4
overstate
were present to vote.
We're not discussing the structure of the National Assembly. We're talking of the PIDD bill.
Yes.
And then we know how this politics works out even in the National Assembly. So the reality is that we now have a document that is defective, that I continually use the word evil, because it even takes away the little percentage it's claimed to have given the host communities. So the issue is, what could, with the push, with the efforts being made, what could the legislator from the South or the Southeast, what could they have done to stop this this clamor for this bill in its present state? But what we must realize is this: even when this bill comes out, I will urge the people in the oil producing areas to ensure that they resist it to the last, because, like I pointed out, it's of no value to them. It even subtracts more than what they had before. It puts the constitution of the whole community development trust in the hands of so-called producing companies. I mean, it messes up the whole system. Previously, the oil communities could even approach these conglomerates and make demands, but now the settlers, so-called settlers, which are the prospectors, those who are working on the oil fields, are the ones that will compose the trusteeship of the host community development trust.
All right, Mr. Eluchie, I think you are now going to the area where I would like us to round this discussion up. So, for the benefit of the people who are following us, who are in this meeting, and those who are following on YouTube and social and Facebook, let us kind of summarize some of the controversies generated by this bill, so that if there is any intervention that can be made, it should be now. Mr. Ugwuonye has pointed out that, well, that it is not too late, because in any event, the Senate has only just passed their own version of the bill. I think the House of Reps passed their own version of the bill yesterday. If there are areas of disagreement, it will go to harmonization and then be taken to the president, who will now ask the Attorney General to review it on his behalf and see and advise the president whether to sign or not. So there is still time. It may still take up to 6 months, and we know that the public views may eventually inform what the president eventually decides to do. So, for the benefit of everybody, let us summarize the controversies for the bill. Meanwhile, let me respond to an issue raised in the chat room. Someone was asking, this bill has been going through the National Assembly for the past 20 years. And so why we are then not able to point them out till now? And my answer to him was, some of these issues were inserted lately. They were not in the original versions of this bill. And these versions, those bills were not passed. Obasanjo tried to pass this bill, but Obasanjo wanted more money to come from the oil companies into the coffers of the federal government. And so the multinational oil companies vehemently opposed this bill. And we know the power of Shell in those days. I think their power is weakened now. But when Obasanjo was in power, we know the power of Shell. And so Shell prevailed on National Assembly. Not only Shell, other oil companies prevailed on the National Assembly not to pass that bill when Obasanjo was in power. And then Goodluck Jonathan and Yar'Adua also came into office. This bill was still there, but a large section of the stakeholders stopped the bill from going through the National Assembly. Now Buhari is in power. New provisions that were not in the old bill, now we are inserted. And somehow automatically, the National Assembly found their voice and they passed the bill. And so that was why Nigerians were like, look, let us look again. Why was it possible for this bill that has been being problematic all these years, suddenly, with automatic alacrity, was passed? And so we now found this. Let us now point out, for the benefit of the viewers, the controversies, and then we'll go back to Haruna, Marcel, and Tony, please. But let's go to Eluchie, please. Tell us, okay. Give us 3, and then we'll allow Mr. Ugwuonye to give us 3, so that we'll be clear. What are some of your disagreements with this latest version of this bill? 1.
Number one is what constitutes a host community. And my panacea for that is that, yes, we should have host communities as the communities where the prospecting is actually taking place or the drilling, and we can have transit communities for where
so to be clear, how does this bill define host communities? Let us be clear to Nigerians again.
Now, that is the irony. Even the bill has a very opaque definition for host communities. The bill calls a host community, it means any community situated in or appurtenant to the area of operation of a settler, and any other community as a settler may determine pursuant to Chapter 3. Now,
who is a settler? To be clear again, because some people joined this discussion late. Who is a settler?
A settler is anybody who is operating a license, who has an operational license to either deal or prospect for oil, for crude oil.
All right.
So
very good.
The settler can do and undo, can decide what is a host community. So,
a settler can decide Dangote is a settler because he has an oil license. So Dangote can suddenly decide that, look, maybe my community is a host community. Let us give them this 3%.
It is valid under this PIB as is, because there is no further definition of a host community. Secondly, the composition of the host community development trust, which is a trustee that will be responsible for managing the 3%. It still allows the settler to decide who will be the trustees, to appoint the members, set up the time for meetings, appoint the secretary, do everything. So this same settler is actually going to be in charge of the 3%, or the so-called 3%, which is going to these host communities. So I don't know if you've seen how dubious this whole bill is. And thirdly, though not finally, this bill tries to remove and make it unjusticiable. Practically, it's unjusticiable. That is, the people, members of the host community will almost not have the means to challenge whatever goes on here. The reason being that it says whatever course of action must arise, must be commenced within 3 months of the accrual of the problem you want to litigate against. And you still have to give 1 month notice before you litigate. So the host communities have only a space of 2 months to do all the correspondences, meetings, look for an attorney. So in real terms, this bill makes it almost unjusticiable to litigate, makes it impossible to litigate against whatever grievances the host communities have. And if you do that, if you make peaceful change, if you make change within the ambits of the law impossible, you know what you've done? You've made
I think this your last point is a fair point, because I think one person said that what this bill will do is actually to encourage militancy in the Niger Delta in the long run. Yeah.
Certainly.
All right, thank you. Mr. Ugwuonye, your turn now. Can you summarize for us what is your grievances against this bill?
Well, as has been my observation here, my brother Eluchie always takes the point that I wanted to make and makes it. So Eluchie has said all that could be said, but if I may add, we need to draw a distinction between, we need to base this 3%. First and foremost, 3% is not adequate. I agree with Edwin Clark. It has to be more, really. It's a way of showing these people that we understand the effect of oil exploration on their natural habitat. It's a way, it's a compensation, really. Ordinarily, these people did not have the opportunity of suing and claiming damages when things happen to them. An alternative way is to have a statutory-based formula for compensating them. And if you look at it, 3% is too small. And by the way, they're Nigerians. You cannot say you have enriched them, because if you enrich them, it is still in Nigeria. What is wrong with the oil-producing communities becoming the real most affluent part of Nigeria? That would be logical. So it's not a wasted money. It's not as if we're giving money to Cameroonians. They're Nigerians. For those who say Nigeria is a united country, let us all treat ourselves equally without divisions. Then let us treat the oil communities as our brothers. Let them be rich. And then we can say, hey, I wish I'm not as rich as the guys from the oil community. That is a reasonable thing to say. Now, there has to be a distinction between areas, what we call transitory communities and real impact community. That has to be done. Another thing that has to be done really is, if NNPC is a company investing for profit, its decisions should be based on economic investment realities. If they see a community where they think that investing will increase profits, let them invest there. Let them determine how much is necessary for the profit they desire. You can't come to any company, any going commercial concern, and tell them what percentage to invest in any particular area. That is not logical. That's not economic logic, really. And on the question of importation of refined oil, those who refine should not even import at all. If you do so, you create genuine competition between importers and refiners. Refiners will do everything to refine more so that there's nothing imported. And importers will be praying that the refiners will not refine enough so they could import. To concentrate these vital competing and conflicting economic activities on one hand is indeed a sign that this bill was not well thought out, really. So I will expect these changes to occur for me to be able to look at the bill differently. As it is today, it falls far short of the expectations of those of us who had hoped that there would come a time when Nigeria will have one powerful, comprehensive legislation that will address all the controversies and issues in the petroleum and oil sector. That's my point.
Okay, thank you very much, Barrister Eluchie, Mr. Ugwuonye, for being with us tonight to discuss this petroleum industry bill. Unfortunately, the other two guests failed to make an appearance. I'll go back to those raising up their hand, but let me read something to everyone now. You know, the title of this discussion is President Buhari's Petroleum Industry Bill, the controversies, dangers, and the future of Nigeria's oil industry. This morning, when I circulated and advertised this discussion, someone told me that the title should be Aliko Dangote's Petroleum Industry Bill, the controversies, danger, and future of Nigeria's oil industry. I asked him why. Part of the question I asked initially was, why was this bill that was unable to be passed for the past 20 years, why have it suddenly, automatically been passed? And the guy told me that the reason is because this is Dangote's Petroleum Industry Bill. Let me read out something. He sent me an article not published in Nigeria. It started with that when in 2013, Africa's richest man announced yet another of the gargantuan project, the construction of the biggest single train refinery in the world, and production was expected to begin in 2016. This is 2021. Dangote is still struggling. What happened? I'm summarizing it, I'm not reading all, it's very long. The project was estimated to cost $9 billion. That was the valuation then. Today, the valuation is $16 billion. Why has this project been delayed? He said, the completion of the refinery has been delayed, moved 8 times. The contractor, speaking under anonymity, said that poor planning, underpayment of contractors, lack of proper project management with over 40 contractors on site has led to most of the delays. And so what is happening? This is important because it will help you to understand why this bill was passed and why the man called it Aliko Dangote's Petroleum Industry Bill. And so because of the delays now, what happened? banks are already calling in their loans. At the announcement of the project in 2013, Mr. Dangote said he has secured financing of $3.3 billion. But the debt burden on Dangote has now risen to $7 billion, with debt servicing of almost $700 million per month. Am I still audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, because at the point I thought I was frozen. So, Dangote secured $3.3 billion in 2013. Now, he is now under a huge debt of $7 billion. So Dangote is paying $700 million per month to service this loan. While Mr. Dangote has been able to restructure the facilities from various local and international banks twice so far, most banks have totally refused to restructure for the third time, with principal repayment also falling due, as well as the annual interest payments. Things have gotten so bad for the billionaire that even his income from his other businesses are barely enough to cover the interest rate, talk less of the principal. This has led Mr. Dangote to seek innovative ways, including state capture. Note that word, state capture. If you understand what that term means, you will know what is happening. This includes state capture to prop up his businesses. Now that the refinery project has been consistently delayed and he has run out of money to repay, enter the NNPC connection, Nigerian controversial PIB amendment, and the crude swap saga. Dangote now devised 3 ways to get out of his problem. 1, NNPC connection. 2, PIB amendment. 3, crude swap saga. You know, when you are hearing government announce some policy, you don't really understand. We had crude swap saga. You don't understand why. You had an NNPC. Okay, let me continue reading. It's a very interesting point. Allow me. If you want me to stop, I'll stop. If you want me...
Don't stop. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, he said, now, look at what Dangote is doing. After taking forex at concessionary rates from the Central Bank of Nigeria, Nigeria is inexplicably tied at the apron strings to Mr. Dangote's now threatened refinery estimate by professional industry analysts. And those close to the project put its completion date to 2024 or 2025. Recently, NNPC announced under some obscure arrangement that it was taking a 20% equity in the Dangote refinery at $3.8 billion. Now, originally, Dangote refinery was valued at $3.3 billion. Today, NNPC want to buy 20% from Dangote refinery at $3.8 billion. When Nigerians asked questions, NNPC was later to explain that it will give only $1 billion in cash to Dangote and pay the balance in crude. The crude swap saga comes into play. Well, while this is a welcome development, Mr. Dangote will have a hard time doing anything tangible with the $1 billion cash, which is barely enough to cover 1 year's interest. With some principal payments falling due, and the bank's unwillingness to restructure in the face of an estimated completion timeline of 2024 at the earliest, Dangote will need at least $3.3 to $4 billion to complete the project over the next few years, even with this bailout. Both the way the refinery project has been carried out and the supplement NNPC bailout for Dangote refinery has turned Nigeria into a laughingstock on the global stage. Now let's go to the. This is this with the. Let's go to the PIB connection. As for the controversial PIB bill currently before the Nigerian National Assembly, it is now clear to keen watchers that the reason the government wants to give a monopoly of importation for petroleum products into the country to Mrs. Dangote is so he can make the excessive and extra profits he needs to manage his rising debt profile for the refinery under the guise of ongoing refinery projects. Guess who will bear the brunt of the higher cost in petroleum products at a time when subsidies are being reduced? The Nigerian people. With his refinery project costs way overboard, banks breathing down Dangote's neck, and NNPC's strange bailout seemingly meager to take care of the principal and interest payments for his debts, is Dangote refinery a dead project even before it is completed, or will time be kind and permit the completion of the project in good time? The chicken has come home to roost to Dangote. Finally, with the $1 billion going towards the repayment of principal and interest, which are falling due in August this year, the manipulation by NNPC and politicians at the National Assembly has now become clear for all to see. As it stands, some government agencies and politicians are more than willing to mortgage the interest of the nation and masses to bail out the unbailable refinery project. Welcome to the Republic of Dangote. So here it ends.
Why was skeptical about reading the whole thing is this? This is an individual.
Well, I'm glad that somebody, I'm glad that somebody says this. Listen, in 2002, I was sent to Nigeria under a World Bank program to establish competition law for Nigeria. That would have been the first time Nigeria would have had antitrust law to closely and effectively regulate monopolies. In 2002, Dangote was an active player in government as an influence peddler. He became a member of the competition committee, which was supposed to be a competition commission, which was set up to advise government on how to go about having competition law in Nigeria. Our essence then, if we had succeeded, the bill that we drafted then was supposed to regulate and prevent what happened in the cement industry in subsequent years. Dangote, through his influence and government and closeness to Obasanjo, killed the competition law. That's why Nigeria doesn't have antitrust law. So it means that anybody can set prices on anything, monopolize anything, go into any sector. Somebody can suppress competition. We saw what happened to Ibeto. It should never have happened if there was competition law. If there was competition law, Ibeto will have recourse. He will have an opportunity to go in there and stop the anti-competitive pressures that forced his business down while advancing that of Dangote. So I'm glad. So I'm not surprised that Dangote will try similar thing.
If I may chip in, I don't want us to degenerate into discussing an individual. Whatever we are talking about a bill, because when the bill gets passed, it will still be in the community. Let us see how it will be implemented. So let us not descend to discussing an individual.
Barrister Eluchie, no. This is not an individual. Monopoly is not an individual. Somebody is controlling the economy. It's not an individual. Well, this is a major event. 90% control over the import of fuel.
It's why I'm saying we're talking about the PID. If the host communities say no, it's not going to work.
Barrister Eluchie, are you not missing a point here? The PIB bill is not only about 3% host communities. A major provision of the PIB is that only companies with refining licenses could import fuel, so that if you have a refining license to refine oil in Nigeria, you will also be importing fuel. Now look at it. We are now saying that there are 23 companies have refining licenses in Nigeria. Of that 23, 22 of them has only 12,000 oil per barrel capacity, while Dangote alone has the capacity of 650,000. So that means
I calculated it is 95%. And let me tell you something. This bill you are talking about, massive transfer of the collective wealth of the country to few. Now, let me say this before we close. You see, in this part of the world, we talk about democracy. What is democracy? Democracy is to avoid concentration of political power in one hand or few hands. That is for politics. We have an equivalent in economics. And that equivalent in economics is called monopoly regulation. Monopoly. So what you are saying is you are willing to allow political competition through democracy, but you don't care if there is concentration of economic power in few hands. Let me tell you something. Concentration of economic power in one hand is far more invidious than dictatorship.
It's not that I don't care. It's not
that
I don't
care. We're talking of economic dictatorship.
No, listen.
It's a serious matter.
It's not that I don't care. Okay, you concentrate everything on him, and maybe he jacks the fuel price to 2,000 naira per liter. Then you will see what will happen on the streets.
No, but we don't want to get to the Nigeria. We don't want to wait until we get to the streets.
We are already there because this law is already. I mean, like I use the word evil for this law. So
no, but what we are saying is the issue is why discussing this PIB. How did we get to passing some of these things in the PIB? Remember, those things were not in the original versions of the PIB. They were simply inserted at this point. So the question Nigerians are asking is, how did this provision of refining that now gave Dangote all these powers got to be inserted into the bill when they were not there before? And once it was inserted, automatically it was rushed and passed. That is what we want to find out.
Why are you worried? You see how the votes get done in the Senate and the House.
Now, the question I asked, the question I asked the individual is, the question I asked another person is, okay, when NNPC announced that they will buy 22% stake in Dangote refinery, another Nigerian, not the person who sent me this link, sent me I didn't hear about it, he sent me the article. I said, okay, can I interview you on this? He said, you know Nigeria? He said, no. He just to let me know what is happening if I use it in one of my programs. I brought the program here. I'm not an oil expert, so a lot of people were of the opinion that no problem. Let NNPC buy. I said, okay, I left it. And now, when this PIB controversy came out again, he sent me another article. And I'm not asking this question that Haruna Adamu asked. But he said, but we have senators there now. We have reps. What are they doing there? Is it that
if they receive, if every senator receives $1 million,
that's what going to Mr. Eluchie. The question I ask is,
listen, I'm not saying it happened. I'm not saying I have evidence it happened, but we know what we fear when you have undue concentration of economic power. Because certainly, why wouldn't somebody buy up the senators? Why somebody wouldn't even buy up the politics? Undue concentration of economic power in one or few hands is worse than dictatorship. That's the point I'm trying to make.
And, I'm not surprised. And that was the question I asked. I said, okay, if those senators are there, is it that they are dumb or is it that they are corrupt? And he said, my brother, he said both. So he said that they are both dumb and corrupt at the same time. So let us hear the people raising up their hands so that we'll come to the conclusion of this for almost 2 hours. Now, let's start from Haruna Adamu again, please. Haruna, please. Minister Haruna Adamu, are you still with us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me, sir?
Mm-hmm.
You see, my final contribution on this issue, the two gentlemen, they have tried to balance the whole thing. But let me tell you, in all our discussion, we should remember that we are in the era of democracy. And democracy is a game of number. Any bill before the National Assembly, the parliamentarian will now vote, and it's a game of number. And it's how you lobby. Going out of the Senate or rep in protest by the opposition will not serve the best interests of those who they represented. Now, There is no any bill that has no pros and cons. Today, there will be a bill that maybe the Southerners, I'm sorry to use it, maybe my brother from another region may feel that it doesn't favor them. Tomorrow, another bill will come that will favor them. So today, look at all what is happening. The money, I think it's 13% derivation, you can correct me, given to the South. When they're agitating for it, it's just like heaven will fall. And they gave them what is happening. They failed to question their leaders. What is happening with the money? That you failed to develop our area. Oh, you are getting me.
Good point.
They failed to ask that one. And now they're asking the federal government more. Before you demand for more, ask those people who they entrusted your money on what have they done. Let me tell you one thing. It's not an issue to give the community the 3% or more. As far as I'm concerned, we still go back to what is happening to the local government. You will give them the percentage, but the state government will now open their eyes and remove the 3% from the community. And the community will not do anything. So to me, we should be very, very careful. In our analysis, we should look at the country. We should look at democracy. We should now, if we are going for, what do you call it, what my good friend Eluchie used to publish on Facebook, remind me, this and the country should be this and that. But let me tell you, God bless you, restructuring. Restructuring is not like that. It depends on how morally we are. If we are morally bankrupt, no matter what you do in terms of restructuring, we cannot go anywhere. It is not the other region that is overseeing the affairs of another region. Those in the north are the one supervising the affairs of the region. If they are bad, the people should ask them. The south, the same goes to the south. So if we bring politics in our discussion always, remember tomorrow will be your turn. You may need the other side to support what you want. If you kick against what they are looking for, and tomorrow you are now asking them to support you, what do you think will happen? So please let us look at this thing, that Nigeria, we want to make Nigeria great. Both the North and the South are Nigerian. We should start questioning those who the 13% entrusted to them what they do. That's my take off. Thank you.
I thank you very much. Let's listen to Marcel, please.
Thank you, Dan. Haruna, I would just want to ask you to also ask the northern governors what they are doing with the allocations they get. You have the largest number of local governments. You have the largest number of states. So when you take the entire country resources and you do it by percentage, over close to 60% goes to the north. So when you are asking the southern governors what they are doing with their money, I need you to ask the northern governors what they are doing with over 60 to 65% of the national income that goes to the north. I am not seeing any factory. I am not seeing a bed of roses. So I think you should first focus on your area. When you have done your own, then come and tell us, use it as an example. No, you cannot come in. Let me finish. Use it as an example to come and tell us. You keep preaching this, go to ask them. Please focus on your governors, okay? Ask them and come and show us how you have held them accountable, account for every kobo that has gone to them. When you have cleaned your own house and your own mess, then we can now come and take your example, okay? So please, let's just have that argument and let's kick it.
You ask many questions, at least let me respond to what you say.
You remember that there was a time that we were gathering names, during the, no, sorry, I am still talking, okay? Remember there was a time that my school, London Business School, was trying to run African Business Summit. I was the director of strategy and communications. And we were trying to get names of people that would speak as guest speakers. And we got a lot of names from Nigeria. Now, these names, when they come, I just wanted to pass them, but the school would tell me no, that they need to vet those names and be sure that the school wants to associate with those people, okay? And you'll be shocked what the international community knows about these personalities. You know, you'll be shocked. Some of the names that came, I wouldn't mention names, but when the names came, they simply told us that they check and they say, look, that they cannot associate the name of the school with this personality. And these are the kind of who we see as you know, people that are doing well in Nigeria. So what I'm saying about this is that in all, people think the world is not working. But you know what? They know very, very well. Dangote, for instance, has been the main bane of Nigeria not growing. And people do not understand it. And let me explain it in simple English. There's what they call total factor of production. The total factor of production looks at what your total population can produce. So if you have 1 million people as population, right? The total factor of population looks at what each one of them can produce. Then you put it together. It gives you the total factor of production. Now, that is what determines the wealth of nation, okay? So Nigeria is poor because over 90% of Nigerians has been disenfranchised by legislation. They cannot produce. And then a few people are given this power to produce. And guess what? They are also milking your forex. The day we get our business model and playbook, and that's why the civilized country will not tolerate most of these things you guys are discussing. That's why at times when I listen to them, you know, it really gets me angry. You are here discussing about Dangote having monopoly. No, nobody talks about that. Alibaba was sanctioned by China for anti-monopoly laws, and he was charged because they know the effect of monopoly to their own economy. And when somebody becomes so monopolistic and so powerful, he determines what happens in the polity. He determines who your president is because he has the money. And that's exactly what is happening with PIB and Dangote. So whoever wrote that article didn't make any mistake. Now, my last statement here is that I want us to, what I usually look at from people is, what is the intent? What is the intent? So if I ask myself, the senators that crafted that PIB bill, what is their intent? We have all evaluated it. We saw everything. And let me tell you, put this question to a layman after listening to this program. I will simply conclude a criminal intent. It's as simple as that. There's no two ways about it. We are supposed to be building institutions. Let us build Nigeria. That's what we are saying. We cannot be running to other countries because they have also stood their ground and built institutions. And then when you come in your own country, when you have opportunity, you want to take the whole power and put in one person's hand and then make it a discretion. Do you know what discretionary powers is? It means I am at a discretion to determine who the host community is, and then you cannot go to court. Are we in a slave economy? Dan, thank you very much for this show. And please, let us make it clear that the PIB has a criminal intent. It's as simple as that. He wanted to rob, the intent is to rob the entire Nigeria of its wealth and push it into private pockets. It doesn't matter whether it's north or south or whatever. It's a pure criminal intent, period.
I just added the word evil to that. I added the word evil from the very onset. I agree with you, Marcel. You're very, very correct. The PIB is a criminal contraption and it has an evil purpose.
Thank you, Eluchie. You know, we need to be speaking. And I don't know whether our Nigerians totally powerless, as in, would we just sit down and allow these people just pass bill and force laws on us? Because that's the part I do not understand.
Why are we bothered about Dangote? It's an individual. I keep on saying it's an individual.
No. Barry says, Eluchie, that is why I agree. Dangote is not an individual.
It's not an individual. It's not an individual.
Let me land.
If he's an individual, then the president is an individual. We can't discuss him.
Listen to me. Let me land. What I'm saying is he's an individual, and these funds, which is purely fraudulent, is passing through international banking systems. So in due course, he will have scammed himself. He's an individual, and it can easily be dealt with. But the issue here is, how do we have a bill out? Dangote is an individual. All this is doing is clearly criminal. There is no country that is worth its name that he will go and do this nonsense he's doing in this country. But luckily, he cannot channel these funds outside of the global fund transfer systems. And there will be a time, you know, there's an American Anti-Corruption Act that no matter where you are and your funds pass through the US banking system, which controls the international banking system, you can be made liable. So with time, it will be taken care of. But for now, he's an individual, and we're here to discuss the PIB. I'm not trying to
and Dan, one more thing there. If Dangote has a business model that works, why is he not going internationally to approach investors to raise money?
No. I think Dangote raised, I think I read it here. Dangote raised $3.3 billion, both from local and international banks, because Dangote is I'm interested
in the international component.
Dangote, no, but the problem is, like I read out in this article, those financial instruments are due for repayment. And so he has restructured the loans once, restructured it twice. And so when he went back to restructure again this year, they told him, no, sir. Those payments are now due.
I can assure that none of those banks will be US or UK banks.
No.
They will be Dubai, Hong Kong scam outfits.
No, and then you might be looking at a takeover of Dangote, because I mean, if he has borrowed money on those terms, you might be looking at a takeover, and maybe the political elite around Dangote are afraid of that takeover, and that's why you see them, you know, twisting PIB and like NNPC. NNPC as a regulatory body, why to company is supposed to regulate? No, we just model things up.
Mr. Moderator,
and then we think that people adapt.
Why are we here discussing Dangote?
Good. I answered.
Is that why we're here?
No.
I don't understand that.
Because Dangote was giving
listen to me, my friend. PIB doesn't mention, or did not, maybe I stand to be corrected, did it mention Dangote?
No.
If we want to discuss PIB,
we extrapolated it to Dangote. We are not daft.
Okay.
We are not daft.
Let's stop all this tribalistic, you know, regionalistic stuff. It's not going to happen.
Marcel, allow Johnson. Hello, Marcel, allow Johnson to speak.
When you talk about tribalistic, you talk about Haruna talking to southern governors and asking them what
finish. I'll be speaking
without asking the northern governors.
No, Marcel, wait for another person to speak. Let us hear all sides of the story.
My point is this: we have to be very, very careful when we discuss issues like this, because it does appear to me that is going towards castigating. You know, you don't want Northerners to be in this kind of forum. You simply don't. You might think you're saying the truth, but it's not making any difference. We understand. Everybody understands the problem with Nigeria. It's just like Northerners sitting now and discussing about APs, that is monopolizing the airline industry and stuff. No, let's discuss about issues. If there are issues that we need to deal with, you know, on the PIB, let's talk about it instead of personalizing it. It's not going to solve any problem. Okay, so if we think, a lot of people have raised a lot of issues about, you know, the pitfall, the shortfalls, and the advantages. Let's build on that. Again, somebody is trying to tell us that we cannot, because the Northerners are not doing anything. So our Southeastern representatives should, you know, be left off the hook. If we are able to hold those people, we have been having 13% derivation. What has been happening? We have to build. Charity begins at home. We have to start from our home and fix it before we find somebody else to blame. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I want to say something. If you don't,
discussing an individual. We don't need to discuss an individual. We are here.
We are listening to. How many people are we listening to now?
Okay, Eluchie, I have the floor, please. Listen. The gentleman, Haruna, is right. Any appearance in this sort of discussion, I never wanted it to take the form of us versus them, South versus North. Even if such divisions exist, I would not want it to be reflected here. However, I want to emphasize, we are not discussing Dangote as a person. We are looking at the Dangote operations. We are looking at his economic operations. And we are saying that it has this so overarching influence that it is capable of corrupting and undermining Nigerian economy. And this is essentially what people study in antitrust law, whether they're discussing Standard Oil or any other. It is not to target it at the individual. No, that's not the goal. Replace Dangote, put anybody else you want. It is the concern will still be the same, that this bill had problems. And one major problem it had is that it transfers wealth, Nigerian wealth, to an individual hand.
No, again,
let's not mention the name of that individual.
You are still derailing. This is the DIB discussion. Forget this Dangote stuff. Whatever we're talking of DIB, when the time comes, issues will be dealt with. And I agree with the person who made the raise that issue. I've been saying it. We can't be discussing. I can't come here and be discussing an individual. No.
Please, can we talk, please? They've spoken a lot. Please, Mr. Moderator, I think it's our turn to speak. I think they've spoken a lot. Can I go ahead?
No, wait first. I think we have heard from you. Did you raise?
No.
Okay. You have just raised your hand again. I was only trying to.
I raised my hand. My hand. You said I would speak.
Okay, let's hear from you then. Go ahead.
Yes. First of all, I want to correct the impression about the 13% derivatives. I am from the South, and I don't expect people who are not from the South to establish value judgment against our place. We are benefited from it, both in manpower basis, scholarships, infrastructure development. Nobody has right to say what have they done with 13%. You go to the South, where we're developed, the infrastructure. So that should not be the basis of judgment. Secondly, I don't like Harun Adamu talking about ethnic coloration. Listen, if an NPC is dominated by one group of people and they're determining the cost of oil exploration, oil economy in Nigeria, why can't you also mention it? Thirdly, when you talk about Dangote, you are not talking about Dangote, as a person. It's just like we are discussing the economy of United States of America. You try to mention Ford Motors on, his impact, his impact on automobile industry. You are not discussing Ford as a person. You are discussing Ford as an entity, and that is what Dangote stands here. So people should not take it as discussing Dangote as a person. Dangote is an economic issue.
I'm very surprised to hear that. Really?
Yes.
I'm discussing Dangote as a person.
Yes.
Who cares about a person? We're looking at Nigerian economy.
No, please, I'm talking. Excuse me. Dangote is not a personality as far as we are concerned in Nigeria. Dangote is an economic institution. And we have reasons to ask questions. Nigeria has 4 refineries. 2 in Port Harcourt, 1 in Warri, one in what? Yes, in Kaduna. Yes, in Kaduna, and they're still issuing licenses. The same NNPC, which is unable, which is incapable of managing the 4 refineries to give us adequate oil, consumption in the country, is still taking another 20% from a private outfit. And again, in the oil bill, in the PIB bill, why should importation be there? You have given license for 23 refineries. You have 4 refineries, and you are still squeezing in importation as a clause there. Is that not criminal? And we are talking of exploration. The question I will ask the moderator here, as a son of Anambra State, who sponsored Anambra State exploration of oil? Today, Anambra State is an oil-producing country. Which federal government sponsor oil exploration in Anambra State? Why should it not become a national subject to put in huge amount of money on oil exploration? When a single state sponsored oil exploration that the federal government has taken over now. So we have to look at it in defining the criminality of that PIB. And when Harun Adamu was talking of democracies, who are the majority? number. It's not a matter of number. It's a matter of criminalization of number in Nigeria. Manipulation of number in Nigeria. That is the definition of number in democracy in Nigeria. And to start with, I don't think Fulani man is a Fulani man controlling all the economy all the Nigerian economy and political machinery is the highest in number here in population. So it's all about manipulation. And that is what we are saying. That anybody who comes here to say, don't mention Dangote, to start with, how many of us know how Dangote? We are just seeing Dangote as a single person. Dangote is the gathering house of all the northern elites and politicians. How did Dangote start? Dangote started with trailer being leased to him by generals from Babangida area. Generals, politicians from north, we buy trailers and give him on lease and you operate it. Even the Dangote conglomerate you are seeing today does not belong to him. It belongs to the northern. Dangote represents the private sector of the northern oligarchy. Let me stop here. Thank you very much.
All right, Barrister Dominic Akabiro, please, can you unmute yourself?
Thank you very much. The panel.
You have muted yourself again. Unmute yourself again. You are muted, Dominic. Dominic, you are muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Maybe he doesn't know how to unmute himself. Try to help him.
He has tried it before.
Okay.
Am I okay now?
Yes, go on.
All right, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, the panelists and the moderator. It's been quite an interesting conversation. Although I joined late, but I've quite learned a lot. I just like to contribute in a few areas. One is a question was asked as to why the Southern senators allowed the bill to be passed the way it is. Let's remember that the way politics is played in Nigeria, politicians give credence to party loyalty. And for them, it's a priority to, they prefer to be loyal to their parties than to seek the welfare of the people they represent. You will have had someone like Ojika Okano explaining why he voted against electronic transmission of votes in the last election they had. Now, this is because they want to favor the party. They want to align with the position of the party. They are not interested in the welfare of the people because they think more of their future political ambitions. They think more of what they want to gain, the position, than the welfare of the people. So most of those people that represent the Southern people in the Senate and House of Rep, they are more interested in pleasing the party machinery, pleasing the president. So when they vote in favor of whatever they do, they consider first what will suit the party and what will make the president happy, as against protecting the interests of their people. So that's why you see some of the senators voting in favor of 3%. Now, again, I'd like to talk about the issue of monopoly and competition law. Quite interesting. I heard what Barrister Emeka said, the efforts he made sometime in 2002 to establish competition authority in Nigeria. And all those efforts did not work out. And the reason is because those who run monopolistic entities in Nigeria wouldn't want to see an independent competition authority. People have said, don't mention the name of this person or mention the name of this person. But there are some conversations you have, and you find yourself mentioning certain entities. Now, in this case, we do not look at Dangote as a person, but we look at Dangote as an entity, as a conglomerate. Dangote has a group of companies. So when we talk about Dangote, we're not talking about Dangote as a person. We must differentiate the two. Dangote as a person, and as a natural person, and Dangote as an artificial person. Dangote as a group of companies. He has a lot of influence in Nigerian economy. He has a lot of influence in Nigerian politics, even though his influence in politics may be silent. but he does a lot of maneuvering because of the interest of his group of companies. So you discover that in sugar, in the area of sugar industry, he has interest. In cement, he has interest. In oil and gas, he has interest. In power, he has interest. And in many other areas, he has interest. So he wants to protect, the group wants to protect the interests of the group of companies as against the interests of competition. Now, if you want to have a viable economy, you must ensure that there is effective competition where the forces of demand and supply will determine price and people have options as to what they want to consume and what they don't want to consume. But in Nigeria, we do not have that situation. What we have a situation where a company grows up and imposes itself on the people. We have a lot of predatory pricing, what we call predatory pricing, and the people are like powerless. People cannot do anything. So you can't but mention such entities that play these roles. Now, let me talk about one of the consequences, or even two of the consequences of having such a monopolistic entity capturing the state. I had Dan mentioning the issue of state capture. Let's recall what is going on in South Africa presently. In South Africa, we have a violent protest that is going on. And as at the last count, over 200 persons have died. Why? The reason people are protesting, people have different reasons for protesting, but it's like, okay, Zuma was in prison because of contempt of court, and people are protesting. But that's not just the main reason. Those may be the reasons we have in papers, but the underlying reason for the protest is because of what's happened in South Africa about 2 years ago, when there was a case against one Gupta. Gupta is an Indian South African who happened to have captured the states during the time of during the regime of Zuma, and he captured the whole economy. And policies in South Africa were made to favor Gupta. Regulations were made to favor Gupta because Gupta was the one that bankrolted Zuma, and Gupta made sure that Zuma became what he became as a president. And when Zuma became a president, he made a lot of policies to favor Gupta group of companies, and therefore Gupta had a large chunk of the economy, and they had large share of the market in different sectors. So South Africans rose against Gupta, but Zuma defended Gupta. So right now, when Zuma finished and the government of the day insisted on prosecuting him, so there are some aspects, there's some parts of South Africans that are protective of Zuma. There are also some parts that are not protective. So what you see happening is a consequence of state capture. Somebody was saying, let us wait until when we get there. And I heard someone say, why do we have to wait until we start facing consequences? So we must do anything that we must do to avoid state capture today, because when it happens, the consequences in the future may be very, very disastrous. So that we don't have South African example where one company captured the state, and today South Africa is suffering. If you look at the protests going on, a lot of lives have been lost, properties have been lost, worth billions of dollars, and it's still going on. The army has been brought into the street to quell the riot after the police failed, yet the riot is still going on. So we do not want to have a repeat of that. Lastly, one of the consequences of state capture, and even this PIB. This PIB, if it is assented to by the president as it is, let's wait and see what's going to happen in the next 1 year. It's going to bring more militants. It's going to increase agitation for secession. It's going to cause people to rise up in the streets. Some of the people who are presently not supportive of secession, some of them will also start supporting secession. Some of the people who have been against militants in Nigeria will start supporting it, because the people will feel that the PIB has become a state instrument to legally oppress the people. And when you allow injustice to be supported by a law that has criminal intents, as some of the speakers have spoken here, you are left with no option but to have people agitate violently. Many more people are going to rise up. Many more groups are going to rise up to agitate for secession or to agitate for militancy, since they know that the law has supported oppression. So whatever that needs to be done right now to make sure that this PIB is not ascended to as it is, that the will of the people should prevail, and the welfare of the people should also prevail. Whatever that should be done now. If it's not done and it is passed this way, let's wait and see what's going to happen. A lot of things will happen in Nigeria to prove that the power belongs to the people. The people will take their power the way they in their own ways, and it's not going to be funny. Thank you very much.
We thank you very much, Dominic Akabiro, for this intervention. And I think on this point, we will come to the end of this program. Those who want to stay may stay afterwards. We may still have further conversations on this subject, but we thank our guests, Mr. Emeka Ugwuonye, for making our time to be with us here now for more than 2 hours. Mr. Ugwuonye, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
We thank Barrister Eluchie, more than 2 hours now, taking questions and making presentations. Thank you very much, Barrister Eluchie.
My pleasure always. Thank you very much.
And our 2 other guests who failed to appear, maybe they will be here with us next time. And on this note, we thank you all who made for your various presentations and interjections. These have made our discussion tonight very, very informative and very valuable, and we say have a good evening.